Imagine a quiet hill hiding ancient secrets. Well, here at Tabor Hill, at the intersection of Lawrence and Bellamy in Scarborough, is that place. A burial mound dating back to the 1400s. A story involves a shocking discovery, sacred ceremony, some thefts, and people like John Sayers and Gus Harris fighting for its soul. We'll look at the ossuary's early days in the 50s to when the stone here was placed in the 60s. So join me and we'll uncover this story together. It all began on August 17, 1956, when a steam shovel that was grading for the subdivision unearthed what was then called a pit of bones. The reeve, the mayor, Gus Harris, came to the scene, and he had an interesting theory on how the bones got there. He said it could have been a spot for a medical school where they would dump the remains after students were through with them. Or that it could have been a site of a cholera dump, since apparently this area was hit with an epidemic way back in 1870. Though he said he did not believe they were Indian because of the shape of the skulls and that no clothing or utensils were found in the grave. So the health inspector, John Chester, gathered 9 skulls and several hundred bones for inspection. But he was quoted as saying that he suspects that they'll be disposed of unless a museum asks for them. But it turns out these just weren't any bones, because Mr. Harris came back with a historian named James Lovekin, and Lovekin believed the burial ground was at least 250 years old, and said that there were probably thousands of Indians buried here in this grave. And he said that it was one of the oldest and largest burial grounds in all of Toronto. It is said that hundreds of residents visited the site, and the township had to erect a snow fence to prevent all the people from coming and disturbing the bones. The health department, of course, decided not to dispose of any of the bones that they had. Walter Kenyon, who was an assistant curator at the Royal Ontario Museum, confirmed that this was in fact a major discovery and recommended that the site be set aside as a historical site, and that the bones could be from the early 1600s, so they could have been resting in this place for more than 300 years before they were eventually discovered. But despite the efforts to keep people out and to mark it as a historical site, things went missing, and police had to set a 24-hour watch. The paper says that a child took a copper bead, and the mayor himself appealed to the child to bring it back. But unfortunately, the paper doesn't say that if the bead was ever returned. Though this won't be the only time, as we'll learn, the stuff went missing from this site. We'll jump forward now to October 1956. This discovery led to a modern Feast of the Dead ritual for reburying the bones. It drew people from all around. In the paper, Gus Harris said it would be one of the most interesting spectacles ever witnessed in Canada, and that 250 chiefs from the 6 nations between Canada and the US would attend. It says that the chiefs will also consider making Harris an honorary chief for his interest and promotion of the project. The paper goes on to say that a day before the ceremony, on October 19th, sacred tobacco was burned on the site and a prayer to the Creator was said. The following day, during the actual feast, tobacco was burned again, but this time Beef and corn soup was offered as a token of friendship and protection from the angry spirits from the disturbance. It also says that the bones that were taken away by the health department will be restored and covered with earth, and the bowl of corn and beef soup will be placed in the grave. And that concluded the ceremony. A nice thing that is mentioned is that the Scarborough motel owners will be accommodating the Indians free of charge and provide a luncheon down at the Guild Inn. By June 1957, we encounter someone named John Serres, who was one of those hotel managers and is now an honorary member of the Six Nations. The chiefs are upset over what they call a broken promise. And at a ceremony at John's hotel, they made a white pine statue of a fierce-looking Indian warrior wearing war paint. They gave it the name of, and I'll probably mess this up, Thonya-Donh Esah-Donyoh. And apparently that translates to, "He who guards the graves." And this is kept at John's hotel, not far from the burial pit. Mr. Sears said that back in October at the Feast of the Dead, the chiefs who burnt the sacred tobacco were asking the spirits not to harm the white people for disturbing their sleep. The prayer that was said that the Indians told the spirits that white men were their friends and promised to create a park around the grave. But according to Sears, they will be hemmed in by backyards and clotheslines, and that the proposed 20-acre park in Indian Village was rejected, and now only a 3.5-acre park is planned. Mr. Serres said that the spirits can't be controlled and that people like Gus Harris and Secretary Jim Neville might be harmed by the spirits. Serres says that the warrior will not remove his war paint until the burial mound is developed into at least an 8-acre park and to assure the eternal slumber of the dead. Now, a little side story that I was able to find regarding the wooden warrior and John Serres is that on June 24th, 1957, 2 armed men enter his motel holding a long barrel revolver, and the 2 men ordered him into a darkened living room. Now, it's said that the wooden warrior is brought in indoors every night, so when the bandit saw the figure, he leaped back in fright and pointed the gun straight at it. I found it funny that the warrior was able to make this guy jump back in fear. Just picture this thing in a corner with a hand axe. Probably gave the guy quite the fright. But luckily for John and his wife, who was sleeping in another room, they weren't harmed, but the 2 men were able to rob the hotel of $310, and it's not mentioned if they were ever caught. We'll jump ahead a few years to 1959, and in May of that year, John is repainting the warrior, adding back its war paint. But at the same time, we have Albert Campbell, who is now the Reeve of Scarborough, is saying that it's a bit hasty for Sears to be putting the paint back on. So you might be asking, well, what went wrong for him to add the war paint? And if it should have actually been done? Well, Scarborough passed a resolution that the bones were not to be moved from the site, and that a 2.5-acre park around the ossuary will be built. So you might be asking, well, what's the problem with that? Well, it's in the fact that local boys have been playing at the site, taking bones and using firecrackers. And you can see here from this picture that these 3 boys in the paper didn't just have small bones. It looked like they have some pretty sizable remains with them. So you can definitely see how Mr. Sears would be upset over what he saw. Sears told the paper that if the bones belonged to a white man, it wouldn't be permitted to go on. And it's kind of hard to disagree with that. Hard to imagine bones being taken from another cemetery and fireworks being used. I mean, that just wouldn't be allowed. Now, in the 1960s, 3 years later, this neglected burial grounds will be seeded and sodded. And the Six Nations want a 20-ton boulder put on the site. And John says they want the Indian prayer to be engraved into the boulder and wants the face flattened so the rising sun may shine on it. And it took some time, but finally, in 1969, this prayer here was finally engraved in the rock. And let's check it out and read what it says. O great spirit, whose voice I hear in the wind, and whose breath gives life to all the world, hear me. I am man before you, one of many children. I am small and weak. I need your strength and wisdom. Let me walk in beauty, and let my eyes ever behold the red and purple sunset. Make my hands respect the things you have made, my ears sharp to hear your voice. Make me wise so that I may know the things you have taught my people, the lessons you have hidden in every leaf and rock. I seek strength, O Creator, not to be superior to my brothers, but to be able to fight my greatest enemy, myself. Make me ready to come to you with clean hand and straight eye, so when life fades as the setting sun, my spirit may come to you without shame. So that brings us to the end of our story about Tabor Hill, the initial discovery, the Feast of the Dead, the crowds, the thefts, John's Hotel, and of course, the Indian warrior. So let's give thanks to the people in the story who fought to preserve this site. And if you're ever in the area, stop by and just remember that you're standing on top of history.